So 7 Oregon counties. This was the day before yesterday. Here in Oregon, we held an election. We got the results last night, or Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. 7 rural Oregon counties have voted in favor of leaving Oregon and joining Idaho. And this includes counties that start at the west end of the state, loop all the way down to the south end of the state, and all the way out to the ocean, which would basically mean that Idaho would go from the Canadian border all the way to the Pacific Ocean, and Washington State and what would be left of Portland would become this little island, you know, that is separate from, completely separate from California, which is our connection essentially to, you know, the blue West Coast. And, you know, it's pretty strange stuff. This 5 counties voted on Tuesday. 2 counties have already voted. So that's 7 counties in total in Oregon that want to join Idaho. Now, it's probably not going to happen. In fact, it's almost certainly not going to happen. It would require both the Oregon legislature to vote to let those counties go and the Idaho legislature to vote to accept them. Now, the Idaho vote is probably likely. The Oregon vote is almost certainly not going to happen, but, you know, you never know. And then, even if it passed both states, it would have to be voted on by the U.S. House of Representatives and the Senate. And so I think it's unlikely, but, you know, hey, I'm not counting anything out. I mean, the Republican Party here in Oregon has just gone nuts. Here in Multnomah County, this is, you know, the county that is mostly Portland, the most populous county in the state. On Monday of this week, the Republican Party, the Multnomah County Republican Party, the Portland Republican Party, essentially, which is very much a minority in terms of political power and you know, elected officials and everything else. They basically split into 2 factions. And one faction has the Proud Boys providing security to them, and they are clearly the Trumpist faction, as it were. And the other half, the other faction, is more, I guess, Eisenhower Republicans, big business Republicans, or maybe even kind of crazy right-wing Republicans, but not quite ready to say that they're going to jump into bed with Donald Trump and the Proud Boys. It's fascinating to watch. I'm not sure it's a good thing. I think it's, well, you know, it may be, because it further diminishes the power of the GOP in many ways. But what it also tells us is, you know, apropos my earlier rant, and this is where, you know, if you have thoughts on what we can do to stop this or expose this or change this or where it's coming from or why it's coming from. But, you know, to my earlier rant, what this suggests to me, what this, I think, says loudly to me, and should to all of us, is that there is this neo-fascist movement. I suppose we could use somewhat softer language and call it an authoritarian movement, not just in Oregon, but all across the United States, that is seeking to reorder and reorganize our political systems. You've got now 4 states that have voted to say, you know, doesn't matter who the voters vote for. The state legislature is going to decide who won the election. You've got legislation to that effect introduced into 47 states. And odds are, you know, a half a dozen, maybe a dozen of them will pass it by the 2022 election, which means that they're pre-rigging the election. You've got parts of the country that are voting to merge or separate themselves from individual states. It increasingly appears that the principal divide here now is between rural areas and urban areas, and the suburbs, the suburban areas, are kind of the great battlefield now. And it was the suburbs, in particular the white suburbs, that had been the Republican Party's stronghold. But now, as the Republican Party goes more and more, you know, Trump, fascist, conspiracy theory, QAnon, all this kind of stuff, as that increasingly becomes what the Republican Party is and is all about, what we are finding, what we are seeing, sadly, increasingly, is that, you know, they've just gone off in this totally crazed direction, this totally fascist direction. If this experiment of democracy fails in America, it's going to fail around the world. This is a big deal. We were the first democracy in the modern era 240 years ago. And, you know, the whole world, there were only a half a dozen of, you know, democracies by the 1860s, and the whole world held its breath during the Civil War. And now you've got roughly 123 out of 192 nations now call themselves democracies. If America falls to fascism, look out. It's going to happen worldwide.